Dewey Gomez. I'm 68 years old. On my daughter's wedding day, I handed her an envelope, hoping for gratitude. Instead, she raised her glass in front of 200 guests and told the room she'd always dreamed of having a different father. Then she hugged the man who bought her that dream while I stood 20 feet away, invisible. I left the hall without a word, but when she finally opened my envelope back home, that wedding became the night that changed everything she thought she knew about her own life. 45,000. Laetitia's voice cut through the pristine air of her Bloomfield Hills townhouse like a blade through silk. I stood in her designer living room, my worn cap clutched in calloused hands, feeling like a stain on her white furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed off a manicured lawn that probably cost more to maintain than my monthly pension. "Hiya, sweetheart," I started. But she was already spreading wedding magazines across the glass table, each one thick as a phone book. "Look at this venue, Dad. The Townsend Hotel Ballroom. This is where successful people have their weddings, where my friends get married." I did the math in my head. $12,000 sat in my savings account, every penny I'd scraped together over 40 years at the Ford plant. Social Security barely covered the mortgage and groceries. "I have 12,000, I told her quietly. "That's everything I can manage, maybe with a small loan." Her face transformed. The excitement died, replaced by something cold and sharp. 12,000? Seriously? She stood, her voice rising. "Other fathers take out loans, sell cars, remortgage houses. What are you willing to do for your own daughter?" The words hit like physical blows. I'd raised this girl alone after her mother Elena died of cancer, worked double shifts so she could have new clothes for school, sacrificed everything so she could go to college and become the marketing professional she was today. "Taya, I could try for a loan, but 45,000. I gestured helplessly around her expensive living room. "You're doing well for yourself. Maybe we could find something more reasonable." "More what? Cheap?" She threw a magazine onto the table so hard it scattered the others. "You know what Marcus's father is paying for his sister's wedding? 60,000, and that's considered modest in their family." She looked me up and down, taking in my worn jacket, my nervous fidgeting. All thou is, you're just a failure." The word hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I wanted to explain about the plant closing early, about the medical bills from Elena's cancer, about doing my best with what life gave me, but my voice wouldn't come. She walked to the door, heels clicking on hardwood that probably cost more than my truck. "Just leave, Dad. I can't look at you right now." I sat in my driveway that evening without going inside, staring at my beat-up Ford surrounded by nothing but silence. When I finally walked in, I turned on the lamp by Elena's old reading chair, the one I'd never moved from its spot by the window. The photos on the mantelpiece showed happier times: Laetitia's high school graduation, her college ceremony. In every picture, I looked proud. Had I been fooling myself all these years? "Elena, what would you do?" I asked the empty room. "Maybe I really am a failure if I can't give her what she wants." I walked to the kitchen table, where bills lived in careful piles. My pension statement confirmed what I already knew: $100 a month, barely enough for necessities. But Elena's voice echoed in my memory. "Love sometimes means taking chances that scare you." I picked up the phone and called the bank's loan line. Chase Bank on Woodward Avenue looked more intimidating than it had any right to glass and steel reaching toward cloudy Detroit skies. I straightened my best button down and checked my folder, pension statements, Social Security papers, 40 years of employment history. A loan officer named Sandra Williams pulled up my financial profile. "I see you're retired from Ford, 40 years of service." "That's impressive," she said, her expression carefully neutral. "However, given your age and income level, there are some limitations. The maximum we can approve is 35,000. The interest rate would be 18%. 18%? My head spun, trying to calculate what that meant. "Total repayment will be 52,000 over 5 years, Sandra explained gently. "Your monthly payment would be approximately $877, more than half my pension." "She's worth every penny," I said. "Where do I sign?" The paperwork took an hour. When it was done, I had a cashier's check for $35,000, plus my $12,000 in savings, $40,000 total. More than Laetitia had even asked for. Walking to my truck, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: the pride of solving an impossible problem through sheer determination. I drove to Bloomfield Hills with the check burning like hope in my jacket pocket. Laetitia opened the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, mild surprise on her face. "Dad? What are you doing here?" "Taya, sweetheart." I pulled the envelope out with ceremonial care. "I took out a loan. Here's your $47,000 for the dream wedding." She stared at the envelope like it was homework she'd forgotten about. "Oh, Dad, that's not needed anymore. Dennis is paying for the whole wedding. He said I deserve the best." The words hit like cold water. Dennis Hargrave, Marcus's father, who owned half the restaurants in downtown Detroit, had called the day before, right after our fight, and swooped in with his effortless wealth to make me irrelevant. "Just return it then," she said, waving her hand, already flipping through vendor cards. "Dennis is doing this out of love. Finally, someone understands I'm worth better than bargain shopping. Worth better." I pulled the envelope back to my chest, feeling foolish for ever thinking $47 was impressive to people who lived in her world. "Thanks for thinking of me, though," she called as I reached for the door. "It's sweet that you tried." Sweet. Like a child's clumsy attempt at helping adults with real work. I had to pull over 3 miles from her neighborhood, hands shaking too badly to drive. That evening, I walked back into Chase Bank 30 minutes before closing. "I need to cancel the loan," I told Sandra. "Whatever the penalty costs." "Are you sure? We just processed this today. The penalty is $500. I'll pay it. I don't need this loan." $500 for the privilege of being humiliated. Money well spent. At home, the silence felt different, not heavy like before, but clean somehow. I sat in Elena's reading chair with her favorite chamomile tea, looking at the photographs with new eyes. There was Laetitia's graduation hugging me tight, whispering, "Thank you for everything, Dad. I couldn't have done this without you." When had gratitude turned into entitlement? When had my love become something she managed rather than treasured? The following weeks confirmed what I already suspected. Wedding planning meetings I wasn't invited to, vendor consultations scheduled when I was probably busy, an engagement party where she told me, carefully, "Dennis's friends will be there. They might not relate to you." At the dress fitting in a Birmingham bridal salon that looked like a jewelry store, she introduced me to her friends with an apology folded into the sentence. "This is my father. He's very simple, but he means well," one of them whispered, just loud enough for me to hear that it was nice she still included me, like I was charity work. That night, I drove to Woodlawn Cemetery for the first time since Elena's birthday. I knelt beside her headstone, pulling weeds from around the daisies I'd planted 3 years before. "I can't live like this anymore," I told her. "She needs to know the truth. Maybe someday is now." Because Laetitia wasn't my blood. Elena and I could never have children of our own. When she was 3 years old, her birth parents died in a car accident, and a social worker called about a little girl who needed a home. We never told her the specifics, only that she was ours, chosen, loved without condition. I'd always meant to tell her when the moment felt right. I never imagined the moment would be forced on me by a printing error that wasn't really an error at all. The letter took 6 drafts before the words felt true. When I sealed it, my hands were steady. 2 days later, I noticed the ceremony time on my invitation was 2 hours different from what Laetitia had told me, and I understood exactly what my daughter thought of my importance to her own wedding day. St. Paul Church looked magnificent under the May sun, its Gothic towers reaching toward a cloudless sky. I arrived at 12:55 for a Hunsara ceremony, only to find guests already hurrying past me, apologizing for being late. An older gentleman beside me held his own invitation, 12 Pharaohs p.m., identical elegant script. "Are you family?" he asked. "I'm the bride's father," I said. His eyebrows rose with sympathy. "Oh." I thought the distinguished gentleman with the gray hair was her father, the one who walked her down the aisle. "Dennis?" I compared our invitations side by side. His said noon, mine said 1, Pulfus, both printed professionally. Mine had been deliberately altered to exclude me from the most important moment of my daughter's life. Through the stained glass, I watched Dennis Hargrave sitting in the front pew reserved for the father of the bride. The pew that should have been mine. I didn't make a scene. I sat on a park bench across the street, the wedding envelope in my hands, The one that had once held $47 in desperate sacrifice, now holding 4 handwritten pages instead. "My dear Tia," it began, "there are things you must know before you begin your new life. Things about who you really are and what you've lost today by choosing strangers over the man who raised you as his own." I folded the pages back into the envelope and walked toward the reception like any other guest. "Dad, you came," Laetitia said, relief flickering across her face. "Sorry about the time confusion. Probably just a printing error." "Of course," I said smoothly. "Congratulations to you and Marcus." I presented the envelope with both hands. "Tia, I want you to have this gift. It's very important." Something in my tone made her actually look at me, really look, for the first time in months. "Thank you, Dad. That's so sweet." Dennis approached, arms open, playing gracious host. "Finally, we meet properly," he said, pulling her close with casual ownership. "She deserves the very best." The very best. Which apparently didn't include the man who'd raised her. "Put this with the other gifts, honey," Laetitia said, handing my envelope to Marcus without a glance. I watched the truth of her entire life disappear into a pile of ribbon and wrapping paper on the gift table, and I found a glass of champagne and waited. The toast came an hour later. Crystal glasses chimed in a semicircle around the newlyweds, Detroit's skyline glowing gold through floor-to-ceiling windows. "Especially Dennis," Laetitia said, her voice carrying across the reception hall. "You've shown me what it means to have a father who truly cares. I've always wanted a different father, and finally that dream has come true." The room went silent. Champagne glasses froze midair. Every guest's eyes flickered toward me, then quickly away. The particular silence of people watching someone humiliate a man they just decided didn't matter. Dennis embraced her, beaming. "You're the daughter I never had," he said, loud enough for everyone. I didn't flinch. I set my glass down and walked toward the exit with the quiet dignity of a man who finally understood exactly who his daughter had become. No dramatic scene, no confrontation, just a father removing himself from a place where his presence was clearly unwanted. At home, I moved through the rooms with purpose. Elena's wedding ring went into my shirt pocket. Our photo from Laetitia's college graduation, back when gratitude still lived in her eyes, found space in my travel bag. My work tools, earned through decades of honest labor, deserved better than gathering dust. The phone started ringing at 3:30. "Dad, we're opening gifts now. Some of these presents are incredible." I let it go to voicemail. The second call came 10 minutes later, uncertainty creeping in. "We found your envelope. What kind of gift needs to be opened privately?" By the fourth call, panic had replaced celebration. "Dad, this can't be true. You're lying. Call me right now." I unplugged the phone and kept packing. Through the voicemails that followed, I listened to her voice crack around the truth she'd never suspected. Adopted at 3 after her parents died in a car accident, raised by strangers who chose to love her. "You're not my real father," she said. "Then who am I? Where do I come from?" Then who am I? Real father. Even in crisis, she couldn't recognize the difference between biology and choice, between conception and 35 years of unconditional love. I loaded my truck as sunset painted the sky orange and pink Elena's favorite colors. 51 missed calls by the time I backed out of the driveway, taking one last look at the modest house where we'd raised someone else's daughter as our own. I-75 stretched south like a ribbon of possibility. Detroit's skyline shrank in my rearview mirror until it disappeared entirely. 53 missed calls by the Ohio border. I turned the phone off completely. "Elena," I said to her photo on the dashboard, "I finally did what needed doing. 35 years I gave love to an ungrateful child. Time to live for myself." Dennis could buy her a ballroom, a designer gown, a photographer who once shot a governor's daughter. What he couldn't buy her was an answer to who she really was, or where she came from, or what it felt like to be loved unconditionally by a man who chose her when the world left her orphaned and alone. That letter would give her truths no amount of money could purchase, and it would cost her far more than $45,000 ever could have. I was 68 years old, maybe 20 good years left. They belonged to me now. The highway signs counted down miles to new possibilities, Toledo, Dayton places, where I could just be Dewey Gomez, not the disappointing father of an ungrateful daughter. The radio played Sinatra, low and steady, while evening light painted Michigan farmland gold. Behind me lay 3 decades of sacrifice. Ahead lay a stretch of highway, and, for the first time in months, peace. Finally, I was free.